Hello, hello, hello. Oh, man, why is it so yellow? And it's not just my glasses. I don't know. I give up. I give up. Just flip the table. Good morning. Hello, hello, hello. Good morning here at least. Oh, it's real loud in my house this morning. Like super loud, so I apologize. Kids are extremely loud. Welcome everyone. It's Monday. First of all, I do want to apologize for the blinking. My eyes are not happy with me this morning. I think it's a combination between of allergies and just lack of sleep. So my eyes are a little funky this morning, but it should be okay. Hopefully everybody had a great weekend. We had a really fun Saturday night hobby night stream. If you were there, it was super fun. This is the model, one of the models that I had built last week on Figure Friday, so I figured I should work on that one. Hello everyone, welcome. So this is the model that I was painting. And I apologize, my color settings are all off. One day I'll figure out how to get it automated. But I got a good start. Obviously there's a lot more work to do on this cool bear creature, but it's neat. And it was really fun doing hobbies with other people and chatting. Why do children even exist? Well, I can draw you a diagram. Aw, 5 months. Oh my goodness, that's crazy. Thank you so much. This is for a game called Wild West Exodus. It is a game that I have not played, but the models are really cool. It's like the Wild Wild West with steampunk stuff and weird creature factions, and it's neat. All right, so what are we doing today? Well, it is Mythology Monday. We are reading Beowulf. So hopefully you've all tuned in for that. Who was it? Was it Kibi Tib? Somebody just sent me. There's a new translation of Beowulf that is coming. The tweet was from a little while ago. Coming out is out, but it was interesting because it was a more modern translation. So there was some interesting modern phrases in it, and I think that's cool because again, as I noted, there are always going to be strict translations of these ancient things, and that's fine, especially if you're studying these, in a classroom setting or something like that. But hey, you know what? Come out with translations that update language to be modern idioms and stuff, because for some people it's so much more approachable and easy to understand when it's like that. That's great. More variety, more for everybody. Welcome, Eredinsk. Okay, so what happened last time in Beowulf? Well, Beowulf finally fought Grendel. Fought him with his bare hands, no armor, no weapons. Tore his arm right off. Grendel slunk out, went into the marshes and down into the water. There was a procession of people who went to see if they could find out where he went. The tracks ended at the water. There was blood in the water. It was boiling, and that was all that they saw. They sang songs as they came back. We got some other stories, references to other characters. We heard about fighting dragons and hiding in holes, which was interesting. And then everyone was at the hall looking up at Grendel's arm hanging there and was like, wow, that was rad. Oh, yeah, previously on That Works. And let's see, what was the end? Oh yeah, and they went down to sleep. So they went to bed, all the Danes with their armor and their weapons nearby. Excuse me. All right, so we are on chapter 19. They sank into sleep. The price of that evening's rest was too high for the Dane who bought it with his life, paying as others had paid when Grendel inhabited Heorot, the hall his till his crimes pulled him into hell. And now it was known that a monster had died, but a monster still lived and meant revenge. She'd brooded on her loss. Misery had brewed in her heart, that female horror, Grendel's mother. living in the murky, cold lake assigned her since Cain had killed his only brother, slain his father's son with an angry sword. God drove him off, outlawed him to the dry and barren desert, and branded him with a murderer's mark. And he bore a race of fiends, accursed like their father. So Grendel was drawn to Heorot, an outcast come to meet the man who awaited him. He'd snatched at Beowulf's arm, but that prince remembered God's grace and the strength he'd given him, and relied on the Lord for all the help, the comfort and support he would need. He killed the monster as God had meant him to do, tore the fiend apart, and forced him to run as rapidly as he could toward death's cold, waiting hands. His mother's sad heart and her greed drove her from her den on the dangerous pathway of revenge. So she reached Heorot, where the Danes slept as though already dead. Her visit ended their good fortune, reversed the bright vein of their luck. No female, no matter how fierce, could have come with a man's strength, fought with the power and courage men fight with, smashing their shining swords, their bloody hammer-forged blades onto boar-headed helmets, slashing and stabbing with the sharpest of points. The soldiers raised their shields and drew those gleaming swords, swung them above the piled-up benches, leaving their mail shirts and their helmets where they'd lain when the terror took hold of them. To save her life, she moved still faster, took a single victim and fled from the hall. Running to the moors, discovered, but her supper assured, sheltered in her dripping claws. She'd taken Hrothgar's closest friend, the man he most loved of all men on earth. She'd killed a glorious soldier, cut a noble life short. No Geat could have stopped her. Beowulf and his band had been given better beds. Sleep had come to them in a different hall. Then all Heorot burst into shouts. She had carried off Grendel's claw. Sorrow had returned to Denmark. They'd traded deaths, Danes and monsters, and no one had won. Both had lost. The wise old king trembled in anger and grief, his dearest friend and adviser dead. Beowulf was sent for at once. A messenger went swiftly to his rooms and brought him. He came, his band around him, as dawn was breaking through, the best of all warriors, walking to where Hrothgar sat waiting, the gray-haired king wondering if God would ever end this misery. The Geats tramped quickly through the hall, their steps beat and echoed in the silence. Beowulf rehearsed the words he would want with Hrothgar. He'd ask the Danes' great lord if all were at peace, if the night had passed quietly. Which seems like kind of a silly thing. I mean, the messengers ran to wake him up, and he's going to walk in and say, "Hey, is everything cool?" Well, clearly not. Everything is cool. So that was a good one. So you'll notice in Beowulf, if it's been a while since you've read it, or if you have never read it, things happen and pop up very quickly. Like, we haven't heard about Grendel even having a mother, and all of a sudden she's here, she's attacking, she's killing people. Boom! Like, we just jump right into that. Yeah. So really, really interesting chapter, because we hear about, yes, that there is this female horror, this mother of Grendel, and we get this genealogy again, right? And so, as opposed to the Norse stories, although again, it's tempered through Snorri Sturluson's Christianity, these stories are written by Christians. So yes, there are monsters in their mythologies and the stories, especially as they come down through the previous pagan generations. But they're like, well, how do we have stories of monsters if we're Christians now? Again, I'm paraphrasing and smashing together a bunch of years, but so here they have Cain, right, the original murderer, and it's descendants of his that are the monsters that occupy the world in these dark, scary places. Yeah, Dovercook, and same for me. That's why one of the reasons why I was really excited to do this on stream. It's like, I haven't read that in a while. Yeah, mothers will get you. So says my mom. And again, we have references to God here, and God helping people and not helping other people. Although again, it's it's always tough when you talk about that sort of thing, and then like, well, why did this guy die? Why was Grendel's mom able to seize this good and noble warrior? Well, we free will and all of that, right? Yeah, so Grendel's mom comes, she attacks, she takes one person, which is interesting. Grendel himself was only able to eat one person when he came right before Beowulf woke up and attacked him. But the worst thing of all is that Grendel's mom made off with Grendel's arm, which again, while Beowulf himself is... he seems to be like a good leader. He talks about the strength of his people and how he and his people came to do this, not just himself. But it's Grendel's claw that was hanging in the hall that really gave the glory and the honor to Beowulf for what he did, right? It's the proof right there of how amazing a feat he accomplished. And now it's gone. So that definitely hits to his glory and his honor. All right. So yeah, Beowulf comes in. He's like, hey, Hrothgar, what's going on? Do you have a good night's sleep? Chapter 20. Hrothgar answered him, protector of his people. There's no happiness to ask about. Anguish has descended on the Danes. Escher is dead. Ermlof's older brother and my own most trusted counselor and friend, my comrade, when we went into battle, who'd beaten back enemy swords, standing at my side. All my soldiers should be as he was, their hearts as brave and as wise. Another wandering fiend has found him in Heorot, murdered him, fled with his corpse. He'll be eaten, his flesh become a horrible feast. And who knows where the beast may be hiding, its belly stuffed full. She's taking revenge for your victory over Grendel, for your strength, your mighty grip, and that monster's death. For years he'd been preying on my people. You came. He was dead in a single day. And now there's another one, a second hungry fiend, determined to avenge the first. A monster willing and more than able to bring us more sorrow, or so it must seem to the many men mourning that noble treasure giver. For all men were treated nobly by those hands, now forever closed. I've heard that my people, peasants working in the fields, have seen a pair of such fiends wandering in the moors and marshes, giant monsters living in those desert lands. And they've said to my wise men that, as well as they could see, one of the devils was a female creature. The other, they say, walked through the wilderness like a man, but mightier than any man. They were frightened, and they fled, hoping to find help in Heorot. They named the huge one Grendel. If he had a father, no one knew him, or whether there'd been one before these two. Hidden evil before hidden evil. They live in secret places, windy cliffs, wolf dens where water pours from the rocks, then runs underground, where mist steams like black clouds, and the groves of trees growing out over their lake are all covered with frozen spray, and wind down snake-like roots that reach as far as the water and help keep it dark. At night that lake burns like a torch. No one knows its bottom, no wisdom reaches such depths. A deer hunted through the woods by pack of hounds, a stag with great horns, though driven through the forest from faraway places, prefers to die on those shores, refuses to save its life in that water. It isn't far, nor is it a pleasant spot. When the wind stirs and storms, waves splash toward the sky, as dark as the air, as black as the rain that the heavens weep. Our only help, again, lies with you. Grendel's mother is hidden in her terrible home, in a place you've not seen. Seek it, if you dare. Save us once more, and again, twisted gold, heaped up ancient treasure, will reward you for the battle you win. Anger, that's right. So we're in chapter 20 of, how many chapters are there? 43. And now we're getting an origin story for Grendel. Well, a little bit. Like, oh, by the way, Grendel and his mom, they've been hanging out in our lands for a while, and people have seen them, and they could tell, even though they're monstrous, they could tell that one was like a lady monster, the other one was a dude monster. And, oh yeah, we know where they live because they were seen going in and out of the water. This water that's so gross and so bad that not even an animal being chased will go into it. Still would rather die on the shores than go into that water. Which is kind of a cool vision. So yes, Hrothgar is mourning his buddy who is dead, Escher, Ermlof's older brother. And he does, Hrothgar kind of, he's blaming Beowulf, but again, he's also saying, Beowulf, you're our only hope, you're our only chance for victory. What I wanted to refer to one more thing, but where did it go? I don't know. All right, well, moving on then. Chapter 21. Oh, let's get a drink first. Chapter 21. Beowulf spoke. Let your sorrow end. It is better for us all to avenge our friends, not mourn them forever. Each of us will come to the end of his life on earth. He who can earn it should fight for the glory of his name. Fame after death is the noblest of goals. Arise, guardian of this kingdom, let us go as quickly as we can and have a look at this lady monster. I promise you this, she'll find no shelter, no hole in the ground, no towering tree, no deep bottom of a lake where her sins can hide. Be patient, for one more day of misery I ask for no longer. The old king leaped to his feet, gave thanks to God for such words. Then Hrothgar's horse was brought, saddled and bridled. The Danes' wise rulers rode, stately and splendid. Shield-bearing soldiers marched at his side. The monster's tracks led them through the forest. They followed her heavy feet that had swept straight across the shadowy wasteland, her burden the lifeless body of the best of Hrothgar's men. The trail took them up towering rocky hills and over narrow, winding paths they had never seen, down steep and slippery cliffs where creatures from deep in the earth hid in their holes. Hrothgar rode in front with a few of his most knowing men to find their way. Then suddenly, where clumps of trees bent across cold gray stones, they came to a dismal wood. Below them was the water, below them was the lake, its water bloody and bubbling. And the Danes shivered, miserable, mighty men, tormented by grief, seeing there on that cliff above the water, Escher's bloody head. No yelling, please. They looked down at the lake, felt how its heat rose up, watched the waves blood-stained swirling. Their battle horns sounded, then sounded again. Then they set down their weapons. They could see the water crawling with snakes, fantastic serpents swimming in the boiling lake, and sea beasts lying on the rocks, the kind that infest the ocean in the early dawn, often ending some ship's journey with their wild jaws. They rushed angrily out of sight when the battle horns blew. Beowulf aimed an arrow at one of the beasts, swimming sluggishly away, and the point pierced its hide, stabbed to its heart. Its life leaked out. Death swept it off. Quickly, before the dying monster could escape, they hooked its thrashing body with their curved boar spears, fought it to land, drew it up on the cliff, then stood and stared at the incredible wave roamer, covered with strange scales and horrible. Then Beowulf began to fasten on his armor, not afraid for his life, but knowing the woven mail, with its hammered links, could save that life when he lowered himself into the lake, kept slimy monster's claws from snatching at his heart, preserve him for the battle he was sent to fight. Hrothgar's helmet would defend him, that ancient shining treasure, encircled with hard-rolled metal, set there by some smith's long-dead hand, would block all battle swords, stop all blades from cutting at him when he'd swum toward the bottom, gone down in the surging water deep toward the swirling sands. And Unferth helped him. Hrothgar's courtier lent him a famous weapon, a fine hilted old sword named Hruntin. It had an iron blade, etched and shining, and hardened in blood. No one who'd worn it into battle, swung it in dangerous places, daring and brave, had ever been deserted. Nor was Beowulf's journey the first time it was taken to an enemy's camp, or asked to support some hero's courage and win him glory. Unferth had tried to forget his greeting to Beowulf, his drunken speech of welcome. A mighty warrior, he lent his weapon to a better one. Only Beowulf would risk his life in that lake. Unferth was afraid, given up that chance to work wonders, win glory and a hero's fame. But Beowulf and fear were strangers. He stood ready to dive into battle. Yes, hydration is most important. Yeah, the male-female stuff is a little extra here, right? So Beowulf says, let's go get this thing. Let's go have a look have a look at this lady monster. They travel through the woods. Even though Hrothgar has just told us that his people have seen sort of the comings and goings of Grendel and his mom and where they go down into their lair, they travel through unknown paths to get there. Excuse me. Yes, so they're going over cliffs and through woods, and they finally get to the water. And they blow on their horns, and they see that the water is seething with serpents and monsters. Beowulf, ever ready for a challenge, whips out his bow and arrow, shoots one, kills one of them. They drag it ashore just to see how disgusting and horrible this creature is. And then he prepares, he straps on his armor, wears the helmet that Hrothgar had given him for killing Grendel. Remember, he got 3 different treasures. But then Unferth, who again is trying to forget what he said to Beowulf at first. Remember, this was the guy who was like, Beowulf, you're not so great. Didn't you lose that swimming contest against Brecca? But no, here he is good and noble. And he gives Beowulf his sword, Hrunting, that has never failed for any warrior who's used it. We'll see what happens. But yes, only Beowulf would risk his life in that lake. He's the only one willing to dive down into it. Chapter 22. Then Edgitho's brave son spoke. Remember, Hrothgar, O knowing king, now when my danger is near, the warm words we uttered, and if your enemy should end my life, then be, O generous prince, forever the father and protector of all whom I leave behind me, here in your hands, my beloved comrades left with no leader, their leader dead. And the precious gifts you gave me, my friend, send them to Hygelac. May he see in their golden brightness the Geats' great lord, gazing at your treasure, that here in Denmark I found a noble protector, a giver of rings whose reward I won and briefly relished. And you, Unferth, let my famous old sword stay in your hands. I shall shape glory with Hrunting, or death will hurry me from this earth. As his words ended, he leaped into the lake, would not wait for anyone's answer. The heaving water covered him over. For hours he sank through the waves. At last he saw the mud of the bottom. And all at once the greedy she-wolf, who'd ruled those waters for 100 years, discovered him, saw that a creature from above had come to explore the bottom of her wet world. She welcomed him in her claws, clutched at him savagely, but could not harm him, tried to work her fingers through the tight ring-woven mail on his breast, but tore and scratched in vain. Then she carried him, armor and sword and all, to her home. He struggled to free his weapon, and failed. The fight brought other monsters swimming to see her catch, a host of sea beasts, who beat at his mail shirt, stabbing with tusks and teeth as they followed along. Then he realized, suddenly, that she'd brought him into someone's battle hall, and there the water's heat could not hurt him, nor anything in the lake attack him through the building's high arching roof. A brilliant light burned all around him, the lake itself like a fiery flame. Then he saw the mighty water witch and swung his sword, his ring-marked blade, straight at her head. The iron sang its fierce song, sang Beowulf's strength. But her guests discovered that no sword could slice her evil skin, that hunting could not hurt her, was useless now when he needed it. They wrestled. She ripped and tore and clawed at him, bit holes in his helmet, and that too failed him. For the first time in years of being worn to war, it would earn no glory. It was the last time anyone would wear it. But Beowulf longed only for fame, leaped back into battle. He tossed his sword aside, angry. The steel-edged blade lay where he'd dropped it. If weapons were useless, he'd use his hands, the strength in his fingers. So fame comes to men who mean to win it and care about nothing else. He raised his arms and seized her by the shoulder. Anger doubled his strength. He threw her to the floor. She fell, Grendel's fierce mother, and the Geat's proud prince was ready to leap on her. But she rose, at once repaid him with her clutching claws, wildly tearing at him. He was weary, that best and strongest of soldiers. His feet stumbled. In an instant she had him down, held, helpless. Squatting with her weight on his stomach, she drew a dagger, brown with dried blood, and prepared to avenge her only son. But he was stretched on his back, and her stabbing blade was blunted by the woven mail shirt he wore on his chest. The hammered links held. The point could not touch him. He'd have traveled to the bottom of the earth, Edgitho's son, and died there if that shining woven metal had not helped. And holy God, who had sent him victory, gave judgment for truth and right. Ruler of the heavens, once Beowulf was back on his feet and fighting. Yeah, Unferth was not so nice to to Beowulf. So again, like there's very little preamble. Beowulf starts out saying, "All right, Hrothgar, you're a cool dude. If I happen to die, be a good protector to my people and go back to my homeland at some point and let them know what happened. But I'm out." And he just dives right into the water. Doesn't let anybody answer him. For hours, he sinks down to the bottom. So we do get, even beyond the fighting, we get these little instances of how crazy superhuman Beowulf is. And then Grendel's mother is lurking at the bottom of the lake. She grabs him. They start fighting, and then she carries him. So here's an interesting thing. So Grendel's mother carries him, armor and sword and all, to her home. And then he realizes, he sort of sees there's all this light. And there is some sort of underwater cavern or some sort of structure where there is air. So they are in air, even though they've gone under the lake to get there. And there's some sort of a hall. Again, whether it's actually in an underwater cavern or if it's some sort of ruins, we don't know exactly. And yes, we don't know how Beowulf survived sinking down into the water for hours. He's just mighty. Grendel's mom isn't exactly alone, though. As she's grabbing him and fighting, there are other sea beasts who are attacking with tusk and teeth. So that's kind of cool. And then he finally gets in there. Beowulf is able to get his sword out, and it's useless. This mighty sword, Hrunting, it's named. It can't do squat. So Beowulf has to fight with his bare hands once again. Essentially, they're wrestling. And then odd, I don't know, I always think it's odd, but at the last minute, Grendel's mother is sitting on top of him. We've heard about her mighty strength, her claws, and she pulls out a knife to try to stab Beowulf, but of course it does not work. And then we find out right at the end of that chapter that God is watching. God is helping out Beowulf. Okay. Chapter 23. Then he saw hanging on the wall a heavy sword, hammered by giants, strong and blessed with their magic, the best of all weapons. But so massive that no ordinary man could lift its carved and decorated length. He drew it from its scabbard, broke the chain on its hilt, and then, savage now, angry and desperate, lifted it high over his head and struck with all the strength he had left. Caught her in the neck and cut it through. Broke bones and all. Broke bones and all. Her body fell to the floor, lifeless. The sword was wet with her blood, and Beowulf rejoiced at the sight. The brilliant light shone suddenly as though burning in that hall, and as bright as heaven's own candle lit in the sky. He looked at her home, then, following along the wall, went walking, his hands tight on the sword, his heart still angry. He was hunting another dead monster, and took his weapon with him for final revenge against Grendel's vicious attacks, his nighttime raids, over and over, coming to Heorot when Hrothgar's men slept, killing them in their beds, eating some on the spot, 15 or more, and running to his loathsome moor with another such sickening meal waiting in his pouch. But Beowulf repaid him for those visits, found him lying dead in the corner, armless, exactly as that fierce fighter had sent him out of from Heorot, then struck off his head with a single swift blow. The body jerked for the last time, then lay still. The wise old warriors who surrounded Hrothgar, like him staring into the monster's lake, saw the waves surging and blood spurting through. They spoke about Beowulf. All the graybeards whispered together and said that hope was gone, that the hero had lost fame in his life at once and would never return to the living, come back as triumphant as he had left. Almost all agreed that Grendel's mighty mother, the she-wolf, had killed him. The sun slid over past noon, went further down. The Danes gave up, left the lake, and went home, Hrothgar with them. The Geats stayed, sat sadly watching, imagining they saw their lord, but not believing they would ever see him again. Then the sword melted, blood-soaked, dripping down like water, disappearing like ice when the world's eternal lord loosens invisible fetters and unwinds icicles and frost as only he can, he who rules time and seasons, he who is truly God. The monster's hall was full of rich treasures, but all that Beowulf took was Grendel's head and the hilt of the giant's jeweled sword. The rest of that ring-marked blade had dissolved in Grendel's steaming blood, boiling even after his death. And then the battle's only survivor swam up and away from those silent corpses. The water was calm and clean, the whole huge lake peaceful once the demons who'd lived in it were dead. Then that noble protector of all seamen swam to land, rejoicing in the heavy burdens he was bringing with him. He and all his glorious band of Geats thanked God that their leader had come back unharmed. They left the lake together. The Geats carried Beowulf's helmet and his mail shirt. Behind them, the water slowly thickened as the monster's blood came seeping up. They walked quickly, happily, across roads all of them remembered, left the lake and the cliffs alongside it, brave men staggering under the weight of Grendel's skull, too heavy for fewer than 4 of them to handle. 2 on each side of the spear jammed through it, yet proud of their ugly load and determined that the Danes, seated in Heorot, should see it. Soon 14 Geats arrived at the hall, bold and warlike, and with Beowulf, their lord and leader, they walked on the mead hall green. Then the Geats' brave prince entered Heorot, covered with glory for the daring battles he had fought. He sought Hrothgar to salute him and show Grendel's head. He carried that terrible trophy by the hair, brought it straight to where the Danes sat, drinking, the queen among them. It was a weird and wonderful sight, and the warriors stared. Dun, dun, dun. Welcome, Mexican Robin. So that was a cool chapter. We have a... Alright, so at the end of chapter 22, they're still fighting, right? Fighting. How is Beowulf going to win against Grendel's mother. And as they're fighting, he looks around the room, this great hall that's under the water somewhere, and he sees a sword. Now, this is not just any sword. It's a gigantic sword that it just says was made by giants, strong and blessed with their magic. Now, again, we have this weird thing in this book that the characters in the world, it's a Christian world. It's Christian characters who are honoring God. But yet we've got all of these elements of magic and monsters and just pagan elements, which is very interesting. Because again, there's no explanation here about who these giants are, what their magic is. It's not couched. This stuff, at least, is not couched in Christian terminology at all. It just exists. It's just there. So Beowulf gets this gigantic sword, and he lifts it up, and in one blow cuts off the head of Grendel's mother. She falls dead. Beowulf is happy. He looks around, but there's something else to do. He finds Grendel, who's laying there. And again, like, just the weird, because these chapters are so short, we don't get a lot of, oftentimes we don't get a lot of descriptions of things, and then later we'll get some details. It's like, oh, wait, that would have been interesting to know previous. Like for the fact that while Grendel was raiding Hrothgar's hall, he would kill some people there, take some back with him to eat, and some of them he would put in his pouch. So somehow Grendel has a pouch, which is very interesting. And then, of course, Beowulf finds him. Grendel is... He's essentially already dead. He says found him lying dead in his corner. And then, yes, he cuts off Grendel's head as well. The body jerks for one last time, but no, it doesn't get back up. And then we have this, and then there's this weird thing in the text where it switches back to the Danes who are watching the water and thinking that Beowulf's not going to come out. And then there's a really odd cut in the text where when it jumps back to the sword melting from the blood of Grendel. So all that's left is the gigantic hilt, which is one of only two things that Beowulf brings back up with him, right? The hilt of the sword that was used to kill the monsters, and then, kill Grendel's mom and cut off Grendel's head. And then, of course, Grendel's head itself. That's so big, 4 men have to carry it by stabbing a spear through it, and 2 are on each side lifting it up. But then, of course, once they get back to the hall, Beowulf just lifts it up, which, he's way stronger than anybody else. Yeah, I think that was all the cool, important stuff in there. All right. On to chapter 24. Yeah, Beowulf is... He's the best at everything. Chapter 24. Beowulf spoke. Hrothgar! Behold, great Healfden's son, this glorious sign of victory, brought you by joyful Geats. My life was almost lost, fighting for it, struggling underwater. I'd have been dead at once and the fight finished, the she-devil victorious, if our Father in heaven had not helped me. Hrunting, Unferth's noble weapon, could do nothing, nor could I, until the ruler of the world showed me, hanging shining and beautiful on a wall, a mighty old sword. So God gives guidance to those who can find it from no one else. I used the weapon he had offered me, drew it, and, when I could, swung it, killed the monstrous hag in her own home. Then the ring-marked blade burned away as that boiling blood spilled out. I carried off all that was left, this hilt. I've avenged their crimes and the Danes they've killed. I promise you that whoever sleeps in Heorot, you, your brave soldiers, anyone of all the people in Denmark, old or young, they and you may now sleep without fear of either monster, mother, or son. Then he gave the golden sword hilt to Hrothgar, who held it in his wrinkled hands and stared at what giants had made and monsters owned. It was his. Excuse me. Let me turn this a little bit. I got kids on one side, gardeners outside on the other, so hopefully the audio is not too bad right now. Then he gave the golden sword hilt to Hrothgar, who held it in his wrinkled hands, and stared at what giants had made, and monsters owned. It was his, an ancient weapon shaped by wonderful smiths. Now that Grendel and his evil mother had been driven from the earth, God's enemies scattered and dead. That best of swords belonged to the best of Denmark's rulers, the wisest ring-giver Danish warriors had ever known. The old king bent close to the handle of the ancient relic and saw written there the story of ancient wars between good and evil, the opening of the waters, the flood sweeping giants away, how they suffered and died, that race who hated the ruler of all of us and received judgment from his hands. Surging waves that found them wherever they fled. And Hrothgar saw runic letters clearly carved in that shining hilt, spelling its original owner's name, he for whom it was made, with its twisted handle and snake-like carvings. Then he spoke, Healfdane's son, and everyone was silent. What I say, speaking from a full memory, and after a life spent in seeking what was right for my people, is this. This prince of the Geats, Beowulf, was born a better man. Your fame is everywhere, my friend, reaches to the ends of the earth, and you hold it in your heart wisely, patient with your strength and our weakness. What I said I will do, in the name of the friendship we've sworn. Your strength must solace your people now, and mine no longer. Be not as Hermod once was to my people, too proud to care what their hearts hid, bringing them only destruction and slaughter. In his mad rages he killed them himself, comrades and followers who ate at his table. At the end he was alone, knew none of the joys of life with other men, a famous ruler granted greater strength than anyone alive in his day, but dark and bloodthirsty in spirit. He shared out no treasure, showed his soldiers no road to riches and fame, and then that affliction on his people's face suffered horribly for his sins. Be taught by his lesson, learn what a king must be. I tell his tale, old as I am, only for you. Our eternal Lord grants some men wisdom, some wealth, makes others great. The world is God's. He allows a man to grow famous and his family rich, gives him land and towns to rule and delight him, lets his kingdom reach as far as the world runs. And who in human unwisdom, in the middle of such power, remembers that it all will end, and too soon? Prosperity, prosperity, prosperity. Nothing troubles him, no sickness, not passing time, no sorrows, no sudden war breaking out of nowhere. But all the world turns when he spins it. How can he know when he sins? All right, so as we've been talking about, it's almost like the chapters, like they alternate. Pagan, Christian. Pagan, Christian. Because again, all of a sudden now, it's all about God. And so again, it's Hrothgar sort of reliving the good old days, talking about great victories, great rulers, what it means to be a good ruler, and to have, sounds like different writers, yeah, and to have glory and honor and wisdom as a ruler. Because it's great to be a skilled warrior, but to be a skilled warrior who's also a leader, you have to balance out glory and getting glory in battle, but also with wisdom. So yes, so Hrothgar gets the hilt of the sword, and he's looking at it and looks really close. And now this is, I talked about this before in the book, that we don't get this so much before, but now we finally do. Like the epic poems that we've read before, the Iliad and the Odyssey, the Argonautica, and some other ones that we'll talk about later, we finally get like actual descriptions of these glorious, ancient, famous weapons, right? They're always inscribed, they're decorated, there's all sorts of cool imagery on them. So Hrothgar looks at it with his wrinkled hands, and he's trying to see what's on there. And it tells the story of well, it shows who made it, these giants, whoever these giants were. And it has the name of the original owner of it, but then it has an actual depiction of basically God sending a flood to wipe out these ancient giants. So there you go. Yes, and it's all about God and God's glory in this chapter. Yeah, and even Beowulf says, I'd have been dead at once fighting Grendel's mom if our Father in heaven had not helped me. So God gives guidance to those who can find it. Yeah, because it was God who pointed out that sword, that Beowulf should go and get it. Yeah, and remember that we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, that the Beowulf story only comes from one manuscript. That, yeah, and there's all sorts of questions about where it came from, who wrote it. Yeah, we have no idea. It's just in the middle of a longer manuscript with other things in it. It doesn't have a title. There's a lot that we don't know about its origin and how it was passed down before it was written down, which seemingly would have been, most epic poems were things that were, spoken and performed aloud, but we just don't know. Chapter 25. Who's still talking here? Okay, so Hrothgar is still talking. And then pride grows in his heart, planted quietly but flourishing. And while the keeper of his soul sleeps on, while consciousness rests and the world turns faster, a murderer creeps closer, comes carrying a tight-strung bow with terrible arrows. And those sharp points strike home, are shot in his breast, under his helmet. He's helpless. And so the devil's dark urgings wound him, for he can't remember how he clung to the rotting wealth of this world, how he clawed to keep it, how he earned no honor, no glory in giving golden rings, how he forgot the future glory God gave him at his birth, and forgetting, did not care. And finally his body fails him, these bones and flesh quickened by God fall and die. And some other soul inherits his place in heaven, some open-handed giver of old treasures, who takes no delight in mere gold. Guard against such wickedness, beloved Beowulf, best of warriors, and choose instead eternal happiness. Push away pride. Your strength, your power are yours for how many years? Soon you'll return them where they came from. Sickness or a sword's edge will end them, or a grasping fire, or the flight of a spear, or surging waves, or a knife's bite, or the terror of old age, or your eyes darkening over. It will come. Death comes faster than you think. No one can flee it. So I have led the Danes for 500 years, protected them from all peoples on this earth, my sword and my spear so ready that no one anywhere under God's high sun was eager to wage war here in Denmark. And here too the change has come, and we wept for our dead when Grendel invaded Heorot. My enemy raided this hall. My sorrow, my grief was as great and lasting as it was helpless. Then, thanks be given to God, eternal Lord of us all, you came, and that endless misery was over, and I lived now to behold this bloody head. Go in, feast, be as happy as your fame deserves. When morning shines, we shall each have owned more of our treasures. Beowulf obeyed him, entered Heorot cheerfully, and took his place at the table. And once again Danes and Geats feasted together, a host of famous warriors in a single hall. Then the web of darkness fell, and it was night. They rose. Hrothgar, the gray-haired old Dane, was heavy with sleep, and Beowulf was glad that a bed was waiting, the bravest of warriors exhausted with the work he'd done. A Danish servant showed him the road to that far-off, quiet country where sleep would come, and take him and his followers. Hrothgar's visitors were well cared for. Whatever they needed was theirs. Then Beowulf rested. Heorot rose high above him, gleaming in the darkness. The Geats slept till a black-feathered raven sang his cheerful song, and the shining sun burned away shadows. And those seafarers hurried from their beds, anxious to begin the voyage home, ready to start, their hearts already sailing on a ship's swift back. Then Unferth came with Hrunting, his famous sword, and offered it to Beowulf, asked him to accept it, a precious gift. The prince took it, thanked him, and declared the weapon one he was proud to own. His words, blamed it for nothing, were spoken like the hero he was. The war gear was ready, the Geats were armed and ready to go. Quickly Beowulf sought Hrothgar's throne, where the king sat waiting for his famous visitor's farewell. All right, that was chapter 25. So again, Hrothgar he's a little bit doom and gloom here, right? He's like, yeah, you can have greatness, you can have glory, but one day you're going to die. And it might be by, and then he gives just this list of all of the ways that you, even a great warrior, may die. Well, it could be sickness, or a sword, or fire, or a spear, or water, or a knife, or old age, or you go blind. Terrence Pryor, they are very short chapters, 2 or 3 pages. So he lists out all the ways that Beowulf might die, but you're better. You're better than all those other kings. You have wisdom. You'll be a good dude. And of course you came and saved us from our horrible misery. Let's go in and eat. And so they do. And then they go to sleep. And they wake up ready and excited to be heading home. And Unferth comes again once more to give Beowulf Hrunting, which he said, I'm not blaming the sword. Grendel's mom's skin was really tough. No, it's not the sword's fault. But it is interesting that he takes it even though it did fail him once before. All right, let's do probably one more. Chapter 26. So again, even though they just spoke, then they went to sleep, then they woke up, then they got ready. So now Beowulf is talking to Hrothgar again in the morning. Beowulf spoke. We crossed the sea to come here. It is time to return, to go back to our beloved lord Hyglac. Denmark was a gracious host. You welcomed us warmly. Anything I can do here on this earth to earn your love, O great king, anything more than I have done, battles I can fight in your honor, summon me, and I will come as I came once before. If I hear from across the ocean that your neighbors have threatened you with war, or oppressed you as enemies once oppressed you, here I will bring 1,000 warriors, 1,000 armed Geats to protect your throne. I trust Hyglac. Our king is young, but if I need his help to better help you, to lend you our strength, our battle-sharp spears, to shield you and honor you as you deserve, I know his words and his deeds will support me. And someday, if your oldest son, Hrethric, comes visiting our court, he will find a host of good friends among the Geats. No one who goes visiting far-off lands is more welcome than a strong and noble warrior. Hrothgar replied, All-knowing God must have sent you such words. Nothing so wise from a warrior so young has ever reached these ancient ears. Your hands are strong, your heart and your lips are knowing. If your lord, Hrethel's son, is slain by a spear, or falls sick and dies, or is killed by a sword, and you have survived whatever battle sweeps him off, I say that the Geats could do no better. Find no man better suited to be king, keeper of warriors and their treasure, than you. If you take the throne, they will surely offer you. Beloved Beowulf, You please me more the longer I can keep you here in Denmark. You've turned Danes and Geats into brothers, brought peace where once there was war, and sealed friendship with affection. This will last as long as I live and am king here. We will share our treasures, greeting travelers from across the sea with outstretched hands. Ring-proud ships will carry our gifts and the tokens of our love. Your people live by the old ways. Their hearts, like ours, are forever open to their friends, but firmly closed against their enemies. Then he gave the Geats prince a dozen new gifts, prayed for his safety, commanded him to seek his people, yet not to delay too long in visiting Hrothgar once more. The old king kissed him, held that best of all warriors by the shoulder, and wept, unable to hold back his tears. Grey and wise, he knew how slim were his chances of ever greeting Beowulf again. But seeing his face, he was forced to hope. His love was too warm to be hidden. His tears came running too quickly to be checked. His very blood burned with longing. And then Beowulf left him, left Heorot, walked across the green in his golden armor, exulting in the treasures heaped high in his arms. His ship was at anchor. He had it ready to sail. And so Hrothgar's rich treasures would leave him, travel far from that perfect king, without fault or blame, until winter had followed winter, and age had stolen his strength, spirited it off as it steals from many men. Ooh, lots of talk about impending coming death and old age. You might say that these are really strong themes in this book. And again, Hrothgar, just in the previous chapter, we got Hrothgar warning Beowulf, basically, you're strong now, but boy, oh boy, are there a lot of ways that you can die at any minute or from old age. And then here again, he's talking about that Beowulf, you would make a really great king. So if your king would die one day, could be slain by a spear, could fall sick and die, could be killed by a sword, blah, blah. So it's like, Hrothgar, why are you so obsessed with all the different ways that people could die? But yes, basically, if your king died by any of these means, your people should really make you king, because you'd be a great leader. You're super cool, you're really strong, you're smart, you're wise. Then they exchange, Hrothgar gives Beowulf gifts, and they embrace. And there's a great moment here, and I love this. And again, it harkens back to the ancient Greek epic poems, where, again, we saw, especially Achilles, but the other heroes too, like, these superhuman, greater than human characters, not only are they stronger than human, but they feel emotion more powerfully than other humans do. So yes, Achilles would, when he's mad, he rages, right? When he's sad, he weeps, he tears out his hair. There's no covering up what you're feeling inside. You let it out, you express it to the world and to the gods. And so Hrothgar here, he's crying, he's kissing Beowulf. It's a great moment. A moment of true emotion between two mighty and brave warriors and leaders of people. Let's see. So that was chapter 26. Next one's a little bit longer, so I think we'll stop there for today. Yeah, we'll stop there for today, because this gets us into, well, they'll sail away, and then we get into the next part of the story. Yeah. Yes, Dover. That's one of the things, and I think that surprises people who aren't really familiar with it when they go back to read some of the ancient stuff. It's like, yeah, these men, these manly warriors, they're crying all the time, and it's not in that culture and that depiction of sort of the best of all men. They didn't hide their emotions. That's something that was a societal norm that was put on men way later and in other cultures than back then. Cool. Well, I hope you are all enjoying this this Beowulf reading and discussion as much as I am. It's great. I am very much enjoying this. If you're new or if you don't remember, I certainly talk about it enough. My book is out. Check it out. There's the link. You can read about names such as Yara, Eric, and Barry. Those are excellent examples of names that are in the book. Cool, Dover Cook. Thank you very much. What is going on this week? This week is mostly normal stuff. We had some excitement here in the house because school started. My son started kindergarten this morning, virtually. Well, remotely, I should say. So that was fun working on Google Classroom. So we've got that going on. Later today, I will be with Jessica continuing Dune. We might actually read some today. I'm not sure how many of you were watching our stream on Friday, but didn't end up reading very much. We just did a lot of silly fun things. I know here on my streams are pretty straightforward. I just sort of do what I do. I talk about my stuff. But if you'd like a stream where you can troll me, definitely